The night the boos echoed through Acrisure Stadium felt colder than any Pittsburgh winter. It wasn't the temperature, it was the sound. A hollow, stinging chorus that wrapped around the field as Kenny Pickett jogged toward the sideline after yet another stalled drive. Cameras zoomed in on his face. No anger, no shouting, just silence. The kind of silence that hides a storm. For the first time since taking the reins as Pittsburgh's starting quarterback, Kenny Pickett looked like a man carrying the weight of an entire city on his shoulders, a city that had grown restless. The offense wasn't producing, the play calls weren't working, and fans were running out of patience. "He's not the guy," talk show host declared with smug certainty. "He's just another stopgap," one national analyst sneered. But for a town built on steel, loyalty, and pride, hearing their own turn on their quarterback was something different. It wasn't just criticism, it was heartbreak. Inside the locker room, the mood wasn't much better. Helmets slammed. Pads dropped. The air felt heavy, thick with frustration. Najee Harris sat quietly in his corner, staring at the floor. George Pickens muttered under his breath, shaking his head after another game of missed opportunities. Even TJ Watt, the team's emotional backbone, walked through the room in silence. And then there was Pickett, still in his gear, sitting in front of his locker, staring at the play sheet in his hands. Not angry, not broken, just processing. He could feel the noise from the outside creeping in. Every headline, every tweet, every angry radio caller questioning his talent, his leadership, his heart. But what nobody saw was what happened after everyone else left. When the locker room lights dimmed and the reporters cleared out, Pickett stayed. Alone, watching film, rewinding every mistake, every bad throw, every missed read. It wasn't pride, it was obsession, because this wasn't just about football anymore. This was about legacy. When Kenny Pickett was drafted, he wasn't supposed to be just another quarterback. He was supposed to be the quarterback, the hometown kid who knew every corner of the city, who understood what black and gold meant. He had been raised on Roethlisberger highlights, Heinz Field roars, and terrible towels waving in the sky. But now, just a couple of seasons in, the same city that once called him their future had turned their hope into doubt. The local media smelled blood. Every press conference became an interrogation. Do you feel like you're letting your team down? Do you think you've hit your ceiling? Are you still confident you can lead this offense? Each question was another jab, and yet Pickett never flinched. His answers stayed calm, measured, almost too composed. But deep down, something was boiling. Even his teammates could sense it. During practice, the usual quiet intensity in Pickett's demeanor had shifted, sharper, heavier, almost personal. His throws came faster, his reads quicker, his leadership colder but more commanding. Najee Harris later admitted in a post-practice interview, he was different this week, like a man with something to prove. You could see it in his eyes. And that's when the whispers began, not from fans this time, but from inside the team facility. Offensive coaches knew Pickett had been showing up earlier, staying later, sometimes watching tape alone past midnight. One janitor joked, "He leaves after the lights go off." But behind that quiet grind, there was pressure building, a fuse burning towards something explosive. The storm finally hit after a crushing divisional loss. The Steelers' offense had looked lifeless, out of sync, and fans had had enough. By the time Pickett reached the locker room, #BenchPickett was trending across social media. Sports networks ran endless clips of his misfires, analysts mocking his reads and predicting the Steelers would draft a replacement. Even national outlets began questioning Mike Tomlin's loyalty to his young quarterback. But here's where the story shifts. Because instead of cracking under the noise, Kenny Pickett went silent. For 3 days, he didn't post, didn't talk, didn't engage. Even his teammates didn't hear much from him. But inside, something had changed. The calm that had defined him was gone, replaced by a fire that even veterans could feel. When Friday's practice came, reporters described Pickett as a different animal. Every drill carried purpose. Every snap came with intensity. He barked at receivers who ran lazy routes, demanded precision from the O-line, and threw with a velocity that turned heads. Offensive coordinator Matt Canada reportedly called it his best practice of the year. And then, just as everyone started to wonder what was fueling this new version of him, it happened after practice. As the locker room filled with noise, cameras, and reporters eager to dissect another crisis week, Kenny Pickett walked to the podium. No team rep by his side. No script. Just him, the hometown kid under the blinding lights. The room went quiet as he adjusted the microphone. And for the first time all season, he didn't give a standard PR answer. He spoke from the gut. "You know," he began, his voice calm but sharp. "I hear it all. I hear what people say. The doubt. The criticism. The jokes. It's part of the game. But if anyone thinks that I came here to play scared or to quit when things get tough, then they don't know me. They don't know this city." Every reporter froze. The tone wasn't defensive, it was defiant. He wasn't lashing out. He was standing tall. "I've been counted out my whole life," he continued. "At Pitt, they said I wasn't good enough. At the combine, they said my hands were too small. Every time, I've heard it. And every time, I've come back stronger. So yeah, the offense isn't where we want it. I'm not where I want to be. But I promise you this, I'll fix it. We'll fix it. Because this is Pittsburgh. We don't fold. We fight." The room went dead silent. Reporters just stared. You could almost hear the hum of the lights above. It wasn't a rant, it was a statement. The kind of moment that doesn't just silence critics, but rewrites a narrative. By the time the clip hit social media, it had already gone viral. Fans who were booing days ago were now tweeting support. "That's our QB. Say what you want. Kenny's built for this city." Even former Steelers players began chiming in, praising his composure and fire. One legendary linebacker wrote, "That's a Steelers answer. No excuses. Just grit." Inside the locker room, the shift was instant. George Pickens walked up to him, slapped his shoulder, and said, "Now that's the Kenny I know." Najee Harris nodded silently. Even Coach Tomlin, who had been standing in the back of the room during the press conference, cracked a rare smile. That night, Pickett didn't celebrate. He didn't go out, didn't post anything. He drove home through the empty streets of Pittsburgh, the skyline glowing faintly through the mist, and replayed everything in his mind. The critics, the noise, the speech. He didn't feel relief. He felt purpose, because in that moment, he realized something. This wasn't about silencing critics. It was about leading a team, a city, through the noise. It was about owning the struggle, not running from it. And as the week turned toward game day, something in the air changed. The same fans who were doubting him days ago began showing up to practice wearing his jersey. "In Kenny We Trust," signs started popping up outside the stadium. Local radio hosts who'd spent hours criticizing him now replayed his speech, calling it the spark this city needed. But the story was just beginning. Because talk is cheap in Pittsburgh, the real test was still coming. The next game loomed large, against a division rival, under the primetime lights. Everyone was watching. Every camera would be pointed at him. Every mistake magnified. Every throw judged. And yet, for the first time in weeks, there was no fear in his eyes, only focus. Because that night at the podium wasn't just a statement to the media. It was a message to everyone. Teammates, fans, critics, and even himself. A declaration that he wasn't backing down. That the fire was back, and when the Steelers took the field that Sunday, something felt different. The way he walked, the way he looked at his teammates, the way he carried himself. Kenny Pickett wasn't playing to silence critics anymore. He was playing to prove what Pittsburgh has always believed. You can knock us down, but you'll never break us. The city could feel it. The fans could feel it. Even the league could feel it, because this wasn't just the start of a comeback. It was the beginning of something bigger, a quarterback stepping out of doubt and into destiny. Sunday night in Pittsburgh wasn't just another football game. It was Judgment Day, the kind of night where the lights burned hotter, the crowd roared louder, and the air itself felt electric. Everyone knew what was at stake, not a playoff spot, not a trophy, but something far more personal. This was about Kenny Pickett's heart, his grit, his right to wear that black and gold and call himself the leader of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The cameras were everywhere. Every step he took from the tunnel to the sideline was under scrutiny. Broadcasters recited his stats with a tone that sounded more like an obituary than analysis. "Just 5 touchdown passes this season," one commentator said. "If he struggles tonight, it might be time for changes." The words were heavy, sharp, cruel, and they reached his ears. But this time, he didn't flinch. He just adjusted his chin strap, looked down the field, and whispered to himself, "They'll remember tonight." From the very first snap, you could tell this was a different Kenny Pickett. Gone was the hesitation, the stiffness, the overthinking. He played with rhythm, with freedom, like a man who'd finally stopped running from the noise and decided to run straight through it. The first throw was a dart, a 20-yard strike to George Pickens that sliced through double coverage. The crowd erupted. It wasn't just a completion, it was a statement. The fire was back. On the next drive, he did it again. 3rd and long, pressure collapsing, and instead of dumping it off, he rolled out, eyes downfield, scanning with calm precision. Then, boom, a bullet to Pat Freiermuth over the middle. First down. The stadium shook. Even the commentators went silent for a second, caught off guard by the confidence in his movements. Where was this guy? One of them whispered, and that's when you felt it, the shift. The offense wasn't scared anymore. The sideline came alive, teammates shouting encouragement, slapping helmets, rallying behind their quarterback. Najee Harris ran harder. Pickens played looser. Even the offensive line, criticized all season, blocked with renewed fury. It was as if the entire team had been waiting for this version of their leader to show up. Then came the drive that changed everything. Late in the second quarter, down by 6, the Steelers lined up deep in their own territory. The crowd held its breath. The pressure was suffocating. It was the kind of moment that had broken them before. The snap came in hot. Pickett faked the handoff, dropped back, and for a split second, chaos surrounded him. A defender broke through the line, lunging for his legs. But Kenny stayed calm, stepping up in the pocket with the poise of a veteran. His eyes locked on Pickens streaking down the sideline. One flick of the wrist, and the ball soared into the air like a promise. It hung there forever. The crowd went silent. Every head tilted upward, every breath caught in suspense. And then, boom, Pickens caught it. 65 yards. Touchdown. The stadium exploded. Terrible towels whipped through the air like a golden storm. The sound was deafening, a wall of joy, pride, and redemption crashing down on everyone who had doubted. The camera panned to Pickett jogging toward the end zone, fists clenched, eyes blazing. No smile, no celebration. Just fired. He pointed to the crowd, not out of arrogance, but out of defiance, as if to say, "This is who I am. This is Pittsburgh." From that moment on, the game transformed. Every snap carried energy. Every drive had purpose. The defense fed off the offense's momentum. The crowd fed off the team's heartbeat. And suddenly, Pittsburgh didn't just look alive. It looked unstoppable. But like every great story, the real test came at the end, fourth quarter. 2 minutes left. Steelers clinging to a slim lead. The opposing offense had just scored, cutting the difference to 2. Pittsburgh needed one more drive to seal it. One more stand to silence the critics for good. Pickett jogged back onto the field, helmet on, the roar of 60,000 fans crashing over him like waves. He glanced at the scoreboard, 24-22. Just one drive. One moment. One chance to prove that everything he'd said, everything he'd promised, wasn't just talk. First down, completion to Freiermuth. Second down, handoff to Najee for a short gain. Third down, the crowd tensed. Another test, he lined up in shotgun, eyes darting between defenders, the clock ticking under a minute. The play snapped. Pressure came fast, and for a second, it looked like disaster, a linebacker blitzing through untouched. But Pickett didn't panic. He spun out, rolled left, evaded another tackler, and, just when it seemed the play was dead, fired a laser to Deontay Johnson on the sideline. Toe tap catch. First down. The crowd went ballistic. The noise was so loud you could feel it in your chest. And then, with under 30 seconds to go, Pickett did something no one expected. Instead of kneeling to run the clock, he looked at the sideline, nodded once, and called his own audible. The stadium collectively held its breath. The ball snapped, play action fake, and he launched it deep again. George Pickens, one-on-one. The ball dropped perfectly into his hands at the 10-yard line. It was bold. It was reckless. It was genius. 3 plays later, Najee punched it in for the dagger touchdown. Steelers, 31, opponents, 22. Game over. The stadium was shaking. Fans were screaming. Players mobbed Pickett, helmets slamming, voices shouting his name. But amidst the chaos, Kenny just stood there, breathing heavy, hands on his hips, scanning the field. It wasn't about celebration. It was about relief, about redemption, about silence, the kind that only comes after proving everyone wrong. Reporters swarmed him after the final whistle. Microphones in his face, cameras flashing, questions flying. But his answer was short, simple and sharp. "You can doubt me," he said, "but you'll never outwork me. Not here. Not in this city." That clip went viral in seconds. Within an hour, it was everywhere. ESPN, Bleacher Report, Twitter, TikTok. Hashtag Kenny Responds was trending worldwide. Former players called in to praise him. Analysts who had trashed him a week ago suddenly labeled him the comeback kid. Even rival fans admitted they'd witnessed something special. And for Steelers Nation, it wasn't just about one win. It was about belief reborn. The locker room after the game was pure emotion. Music blasting, laughter, shouting, the sound of a team that had just been reborn. Najee poured water over Pickett's head while Pickens yelled, "That's our QB." Even Coach Tomlin, stoic as ever, pulled him aside and said with that trademark half-smile, "You finally made them feel you." But the most powerful moment came when the cameras were off. Pickett sat alone at his locker, still in his uniform, gloves half off, towel draped around his shoulders. The celebration faded into a distant hum as he looked down at his hands. The same hands critics mocked during the draft. The same hands that had just thrown 2 touchdowns and led a game-winning drive. He smiled quietly, not out of pride, but out of peace, because he knew this wasn't the end of his journey. It was the beginning of his fight. The critics would be back. The challenges would return. But from that night on, one thing had changed forever. Kenny Pickett was no longer just the hometown kid with potential. He was the leader who took the doubt, the pressure, the pain, and turned it into fire as the last fans left the stadium. The Pittsburgh skyline glowed gold under the night sky, reflecting off the river like a promise. And for the first time in weeks, the city felt whole again. Because in Pittsburgh, respect isn't given. It's earned in blood, sweat, and belief. And that night, Kenny Pickett earned it all.